What's up, everybody? Thanks for stopping by the show. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. It's good to have you with me today, or us, whatever you want to call it. Today, I just released one earlier. This is going to be the second one that I was able to pump out today. I took a day off of work and got a bunch of stuff done that I needed to do, and this was on the list. So, this episode is going to be with Mathew Cox. Mathew is a former real estate mortgage fraudster. He'd stolen upwards of $25 million. And one in the Wikipedia I looked up of him, $25 million that he was able to steal on that account. I've actually seen one that said 55 million too, so I'm not sure. So let's go like halfway in between that, right? Still, it's a lot of money for fraud. And he also spent an exorbitant amount of time in federal prison. One of the places that he was at was, oh God, I can't remember the name of it. It's in California. I was trying to get there when I went to federal prison, but the closest they could get me was Sheridan, Oregon. So yeah, while he was in there, he started meeting people, and the guy's really sociable. So, I mean, he's easy to get along with. So I could see how, he's very inquisitive too. So I could see how he would do that while he's in prison. He, took a bunch of people's stories and wrote books, of their stories. And so he did a bunch of those. He's got quite a few published books out there. He is a pop artist guy. He is a really good artist. And also a podcaster. He has a podcast called True Crime. It's the True Crime podcast, I believe. God, I should know better. It's in the description. All of the places that you could find him and his website are in the description of this, so check that out. What else do I got going on here? Let's see. Not a whole lot, just the normal stuff, man. If you're getting something out of this show, do me a favor and flip some value back to me, either in monetarily, if you could afford to support the show through donations of cash. Those are always nice, but I understand we're in a time of great inflation and uncertainty right now, so I can totally understand if you're strapped too. I know I am. But that's not the only way you can support the show. You can also share the show with people that you think that maybe get something out of it or might be interested in the content. You can drop a review on iTunes if you're listening here on iTunes. There's also other ways of supporting the show that way. Sharing is a huge one. Review the show, rate it, review, all that stuff. So if you can do that, that would be awesome. If you're looking for me on social media, you can follow my link tree, which is in the description. That will take you to all of my places and spaces and things that I'm on is the link tree. I don't have my website up yet. I mean, it's still under construction, still trying to figure that out. So the best way to do it now is to go to the link tree. If you have any questions, or if you've listened to an episode and you want to reach out to me, you have suggestions of people that you may want to hear be on the show, feel free to email me at nowheretogobutupnow@gmail.com. And this was a really good interview. It was on location, so let me give you a little background on this. A guy by the name of Tyler that I met in Clubhouse got me on a show called Koncrete. Concrete's a pretty big podcast that's on YouTube. It's got over 500,000 followers on that channel. So I booked a trip and flew down to I flew down to Tampa, Florida. And while I was there, I was going to be there for 3 days. And so one of the days I wanted to make best use of the time that I was there. So he hooked me up with a meeting with Chris Missotes. Ah, damn, I can never pronounce that guy's last name. Chris Krimitsos, who is the guy that started Podfest. And so Podfest is this huge convention down in Orlando. And this guy is the guy who was the creator of it. And so I went down there and had a meeting with him and talked with him about some things for about an hour. And then another person that I was supposed to hook up with was Mathew Cox, or Matt Cox. And he came to my hotel room, and the room that I got, I specifically got because it had a break-off section with where you have the TV and the couch and all the other stuff, which is separate from the bed. So the bed wasn't in the way. And so I set this up. He came in and we did it on location. My only complaint is about myself and how, it was, I think it had been an hour that we had been, not an hour, but a year almost at that point that we'd been locked down, or maybe a little bit over, because that was late April, early May. So we were a whole year we'd been locked down, and I'd been not working and on disability. So I wasn't even really exercising or doing a whole lot. I was doing a lot of podcasts. And you can tell. Let's just say that I was like, holy shit. I didn't realize I was gotten that big. So yeah, that's my only complaint with it is myself and the way that I looked and like how much weight I had gained over that year. But, yeah, it's funny. Matt is funny. He has a lot of stories and he's super animated and just, he's a good guy to have as a guest. That's for sure. So check it out. And with that, let's get to the show.
Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
All right, so this is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. We're doing things a little bit different today. I'm in actually Florida. Came down to be on a show called Koncrete, YouTube channel, and I think it goes to the podcast platforms itself too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And Tyler Sherman hooked this up. He's an interesting fella.
Yeah.
I like Tyler, actually. And he hooked up some other things, and one of them was Matt Cox here, or Mathew Cox, whichever you prefer.
Everybody ends up calling me Matt, so it doesn't matter.
You know,
I can't fight it.
I know a lot of cool guys named Matt. I don't know a whole lot of cool guys named Mathew.
Well, I mean, look, bro, it could be Matt, David, Sean, Michael. I've been a Carter. I've been a Scott. I've been all. So
yeah,
it really doesn't matter to me.
Okay. So the reason why I think that Tyler hooked us up is because we're both formerly incarcerated people.
Right.
You were in federal prison for a lot longer than I was. You were actually there for doing some bigger financial crimes, whatever you want to call it. Mine.
Yeah. Fraud. Whatever.
Yeah, mine was sort of fraud, but not really. Like I was kind of a little guy in whatever I was doing. I got in there, did 3 years. I actually did 18 months there, did 18 months in the state. So it was really not enough time for anything. By the time I touched down, got comfortable, it was time to leave.
Right.
And programs and all that other stuff are usually reserved for the people that have longer periods of time and the waiting lists and all that stuff. So none of that stuff ever really applied to me. I just went there and got my body looking good, which you probably can't tell now because I got the COVID 40 handling, but whatever. It'll go when I want it to go.
Yeah. Okay. What were we talking about?
We were talking about
like I came in, we started talking, and then we like said we got to hurry up and go ahead and start recording this.
Yeah. So what we were talking about is I was telling you about some of the episodes that I saw you in, and one of the favorite ones where I thought was really funny was when you were doing a live with Danny on Koncrete, and you were doing your pictures that you were trying to sell, and you sold some.
Bro, I sold I sold 16 of those.
Did you?
I've actually got 2 more orders, so I'm actually painting some more of them right now. But yeah, like that night, I think in that video I sold 3 or 4 or 5, something like that.
Wow. Well, you're a good artist. I mean,
Appreciate
you do really good work, and you did some freehand stuff right on the spot there, and it was a really entertaining episode, especially when they were fucking with you. And you were getting so frustrated.
Oh, it's that's their shtick, is to interrupt me and ask ridiculous questions and bug me and and then ask me like about my personal life and what's going on, because Danny knows Jess and he knows my friend Stacy. We know really just because I was on the podcast, so we know a bunch of people, and we were. Oh, I know it was a Scientology.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
You're talking about a girl and that you were dating, and then you were talking about some.
Yeah, my girlfriend just texted me. That's what it was.
Okay.
My girl just texted me, and you asked, "Is that the same chick that you were talking about?"
Yeah.
No, that girl. Like I went on one date with her, but what I started laughing about is that I still text her. Like we text each other now.
Mm-hmm.
She was cool. We had a good time, but I got back with my girlfriend.
Okay.
And her name's fuck all. I knew this was a problem. Fuck, do you have any way for me to, what can I do to prop this up?
I don't know. What can we?
Small pillow or something I knew this was gonna possibly bend like this.
Let's see.
A book.
We can do this.
What about do you have clothes? Like a shirt or something?
Oh, you know what I do? I have a shirt for you.
Oh, okay. Let's use it for this first. I ordered one of my own shirts on for Inside True Crime for my.
Hopefully, it'll shrink up and you'll be able to fit it.
It's fine.
It's my nonprofit that I started to help guys re-entering from incarceration. So now I know what you can do. Here.
Oh, I got it. Look. I got it. It just needs a little prop. That's all. So it just needs a. Yeah, that's fine. I'll cut that out.
Weren't we just talking about creative guys that have been to prison?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was going to say I got back. So I ended up getting back with my girl Jess, but I still text the Scientology chick because we went out. We had a good time. She was cool. The next day she was like, look, I don't think it's going to work out. And I was like, nah, it's fine. I understand. And so, but we still, she would text me like, hey, what's going on? Have you talked to your girlfriend? And I'm like, yeah, she came over last night, or your ex-girlfriend. And I said she came over last night, and then she'd tell me about guys she's dating. And so we've been going back and forth just talking, right? Mm-hmm. Just as friends. And so the other day I was in the car my girlfriend and I, so Jess and I ended up getting back together.
Okay.
So we get back together, and we went to church the other day. So after church, I had to go by Home Depot. Well, she had a headache, so I go, well, pull in here. I'll get you some Tylenol. She's like, all right. So we get in there, and we pull in, I get some Tylenol. I get back in the car. I said, all right. I said, well, let's go to Home Depot. And she goes, okay. She goes, well, on the way there, she said, you can tell me who Jen is. And I'm like, what? Who? And she goes, she goes, that's the Scientology girl, right? Like, I know who it is. I know it's that girl. And I was like, no, I know. And she's like, are you still talking to her? I was like, no, we text each other. I told you I'm still texting.
We're not really talking. We're just texting.
Well, I mean, I told her I'm still texting. Like, she had asked me at one point, she goes, are you still talking to any of the girls that you went on dates with when we were broken up? And I went, I mean, there's one chick I text every once in a while. It's not a big deal. And she's like, doesn't mean anything, right? I was like, no, it's nothing. It was like, it's not going to work out. Like, she's a nice person, but it's not going to happen. She's okay. I said, I told you about the girl. She's like, well, I didn't know it was that girl. The one girl that you actually liked. That's the girl that you texted. I went, no, but we're just friends. And so listen, and the thing is like, because Jess is so reserved, like she's not extremely emotional. She doesn't get upset. She doesn't get super happy. Like she's, middle of the road. And so she was so irritated and so upset. Like, I felt good about it. So I started laughing. I'm enjoying it. I'm like, I'm laughing and think it's hilarious. And she's like, oh, you think it's funny? You think it's fun? Don't talk to me. Don't talk. I'm like, baby, come here. And I'm trying to grab her. She's like, stop it. It was just, funny. It was the whole, for the next couple hours, it was like that. We're driving. I'd look over and smile at her and she'd smile. And then my phone, someone would text me like, beep, beep. Yeah. And she'd go, and she'd glare at me. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you glaring at me? It's Tommy. What are you doing? She's like, just don't talk to me. Just don't talk. I'm like, what? So anyway, it's so that's what happened with that chick. That's hilarious, bro.
Dude, Scientology is crazy.
It's not crazier than any other religion.
Well, they're all cults. They're all fucking cults.
They're all look, religions. You could look. They're religions. It makes people feel good. You don't have to believe everything, as long as they're not telling you to sacrifice, small children.
Not yet. They did back in the day. I was locked up with a dude when I did my federal time in Sheridan, Oregon, which is a medium. Right. I'd never been to anything higher than a medium.
And this is in state?
No, this was federal.
Federal, you said federal time.
Yeah, sorry. FCI Sheridan is where I ended up landing there. I went to a high when I started out in state prison, but it wasn't like the worst thing that I ever saw was somebody got doused with baby oil with a hot pot. Yeah. I never saw anybody get killed. I never saw anybody do any of that other stuff, or get raped or hurt any of the things that I have other friends that have channels that other people that have been on my show where they talk about the serious shit that happens in USPs and stuff like that. So I was lucky because I wouldn't want to hear any of that shit.
Yeah, Yeah, I've seen people get stabbed and hit with locks and beat up and stuff like that, and actually heard a guy get raped one time. He was in another cell on a top tier, and I was in the Marshals holdover in Atlanta, and you just hear them just kicking and screaming and yelling and and then the next day you realize that the dude, he had raped the one guy. They'd put I almost said punk. They put a gay guy in with a regular guy, and he didn't want him in his cell, and he threw a fit, but the guards were like, that's it, this is it, and they put him in just before lockdown, so then they're locked down, and now you're going to be in there all night. Yeah. And the guy ends up, beating him up and raping him. Yeah. And I'd met guys that had been raped. Like I'd met a guy that talked about how he basically came in they stuck him in with a guy that had 3 life sentences and had already been to the state for rape. And this was a little white guy, and they put him in there, and I don't know what his charge was, but I think he was a sex offender. Okay. And he went to the pen. So in federal prison, which almost never happens because most sex offenders in federal prison end up going to a low because most of them are not hands-on. They never touched anybody. They looked at pictures. See what I'm saying? So so they're not violent. Yeah. They're sex offenders, and they're a danger, and they're sex offenders, but they're not dangerous to other inmates. So, but this kid obviously did something that ended up in a pen, and he went to trial. Yeah. He ended up going to a pen. And while he was there, they put him in with this guy who had 2 or 3 life sentences, and he's a little soft white guy. They put him in with this guy that's just apparently a monster. And, went in there, and he, same thing when he got to the medium, which he told everybody that asked him what his charge was. Hey, so what are you here for? He was like, oh, my lawyer said not to talk to anybody about my charges. Okay, that's not going to fly.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, immediately we want to know now.
Right. Now it's a big deal. So, but in the pen, they stuck him in with this guy. He was in there for a day or two. The guy didn't talk to him. One day he walked in. He said, all I remember is walking in just before count. And he said, I got hit in the back of the head with something, and he woke up the next morning with the guards standing over him screaming. So apparently what had happened was his cellie knocked him out. He doesn't know whether it was before count or after count. Even if it was, like in the pen, they don't necessarily stand up.
Yeah.
So they could be laying down. So he could have knocked him out, put him in bed. Guards walked by, saw him, or did a very cursory count to begin with. The guy raped him, so he woke up the next morning after the doors had been opened. So the guy, his cellie was in like the rec yard at this point.
Yeah, he's playing handball.
Yeah, he's playing handball the next day, waiting for them to find his cellie. They find him. He's laying in the middle of the floor. He said, "Blood's everywhere," and he said, "I've been raped." And he said, he's sitting in a puddle of and it actually cracked his skull. And so the reason he and I had actually talked was because his face he'd gotten in the medium. He'd been there a month or two, and one day I saw him and his face was swollen up. And I go, "Bro, what happened?" He said, and they named whatever it is. Apparently, if you get a skull fracture and it doesn't heal correctly, periodically you'll get swelling in your face. And so he said every 3 or 4 months my face swells up for a couple of days. And then it goes away. Oh, it was brutal. Yeah. So I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's a horrible environment.
Yeah, for sure it is. And the guards don't help. They instigate a lot of the stuff, or they'll put people in certain places, or they'll come through in the middle of the night and tell a shot caller that somebody's going to drop, here, or somebody's coming through, or a lot of the times, what were they doing? They were bringing in bags of bugler. And so you would have your person on the outside, give them $500, and they bring in a bag of bugler, and then just throw it in your cell, in the middle of the night.
Right.
And you got to do all your rolling them up and do everything that you're doing. And it's crazy, man. They would get like 3,000 little pinners out of a bag of bugler, and they were charging, I think a book of stamps at that time was $6.
Yeah, book of stamps was $10 by the time I left.
Yeah, so yeah, it was pretty crazy, man. And like, what are you gonna do what do they do with all those fucking stamps?
They just circulate. I mean, I've known guys that have had, like $4,000 worth of stamps in their locker. I mean, just packed. It's just hidden in everything because the guards come in, they search.
Yeah,
it's just rolled up in everything. Everything the guy has. You
know what they would do in ours? They would have some people that were working in the plumbing, right? They would say that there's a problem with their, I got an issue with my toilet. And so the guys would come in and they would pull the toilets off and then shove all their fucking stamps behind there.
Right. Yeah, I got this. Nice.
Good.
I was gonna say, well, a lot of things too. A lot of guys will just have other people. Like I had buddies who were like, "Look, I've got like $500 in stamps. Can you hold like $50 worth or $100?" Or they'll give them to different people to hold. So
yeah,
whatever.
Fucking prison currency.
Yeah, just stupid. The whole thing's just stupid.
So let's talk a little bit about your your story. Like, what happened to you? How did you end up in federal prison for the amount of time that you were in?
I'm innocent.
Yeah,
right. What happened? I mean, I owned a mortgage company and I started committing, mortgage fraud. I mean, the short version, like, you don't want to do a 2-hour version, I mean, right? I mean,
Well, was it, I mean, was it, so was it around the stuff that was happening that caused the financial crisis, or was something completely different?
No, I always get some guy. There's always one or two guys out there that will be like, "It's guys like this that cause the financial crisis." But then you don't understand what happened with the financial crisis. I wasn't on Wall Street. I didn't.
Yeah, Wall Street caused that.
I didn't package loans. I didn't come up with underwriting guidelines. I didn't. Most of mine was just real estate fraud, and there was credit card fraud, which I never really get into. Essentially, I own a mortgage company. Eventually, I got in trouble for. I got charged with wire fraud because I was manufacturing, or I was making pay stubs, W-2s, that sort of thing. Well, what I'd end up doing was I was also buying properties. So there's something called seasoning, if you buy a property for $50,000 and you want to refinance it, you can't buy it for 50. Let's say it's worth $100,000, but you get a good deal. So you buy it for 50. You turn around, you go straight to your bank and say, "Hey, it's worth 100. Can I refinance it? Pull out 40 grand or 50 grand." They say, "Well, you can, but it has to be seasoned, which means that you have to wait a year."
Okay.
Well, the issue was, even a married couple, same thing. So I was buying properties, renovating them, and I want my money back. Right? So what happened? Did that just tilt? The fuck? Did that just happen? Fucking ridiculous, man. This is so fucked up.
That shit's still going, too.
Huh? Yeah, it's still going. Oh, it'll go.
No, I was looking at the Zoom.
This thing. Yeah, I'm super gluing that thing. Because I use it like that all the time because I like the way when it dips down more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I prefer... Come on, bro. What are you doing? Facial recognition.
Oh, it stopped.
That's fine. Well, I don't mind if it stops as long as it's still recording. Might want to do that, see? Yeah, I don't mind. That's fine. Because I'll drop this whole thing into Final Cut Pro and put it all together.
No, dude, I haven't used Final Cut. I use Cyberlink.
You're in iTunes or iMovie or whatever. So I was using iMovie. Anyway, it works out great. So one of the things I did was, did that just start tilting, or had it been tilting?
I have no idea. I just heard a little. Dong. I was like, "What's that?"
That'll be funny because I'll get it later and notice that tilt is slow. I have to check it every once in a while. That's what I'll have to do. So I'll check this thing every once in a while. Whatever. So anyway, so to get around seasoning, I started buying properties in my own name, fixing them up, and then just selling them to my ex-wife. Because they didn't know, my ex-wife, which she was my wife at the time, but she didn't take my last name.
Okay.
So the lenders that were doing this to, getting the loans through, they have no idea that she's related to me. So you can't do that because it's not an arm's length transaction, right? You know this person, and you're married to them. Yeah. So I did that for a while. Well, I had a friend that got in trouble, and they told the authorities what I was doing. They investigated. I get indicted. I get 3 years paper, but I can't own the mortgage company anymore. Okay. So I get rid of the mortgage company. Well, I actually transfer it to a friend of mine. I'm still kind of running it.
Yeah.
So I start flipping houses. I figure I'm just going to flip houses full time because I was doing it on the side.
Yeah.
If you're a mortgage broker or you're a realtor, you're usually typically coming across deals and you're either flipping houses or you're buying rental properties or whatever. I was doing everything. So I ended up, I got rid of the mortgage company, but I'm still kind of running it and getting a check, but it's not enough, right? So I got divorced from my wife at the time. And so we got divorced, and I started saying, what am I going to do? I'm going to flip properties, but flipping properties sucks. Yeah. It's a bunch of work. You end up being a construction worker, and you don't make that much money, and you have all the responsibility. And so you end up thinking every deal I got, I thought I'm going to buy this, fix it up, do this, make 30, 40 grand. You end up making half what you think, and it's twice as much of a problem. And so I thought, you know what I need to do? And then it's always the appraisals are always an issue. Like, it doesn't appraise high enough. It's always an issue. You bought the property for $40,000. Now you're trying to sell it for $100,000. What happened? The lenders start asking too many questions. It's a whole issue. So I decided if I could get the houses to appraise higher, then that would alleviate that issue for me. Okay. And this is an area where the houses are appraising for $80,000 to $100,000. You can buy a rehab for $40,000. Yeah. Or $50,000. So I started going in, and I thought, okay, if I buy them for $40,000 or $50,000, but I record the sale of the property at $200,000 instead of $100,000, or instead of $40,000, I recorded at $200,000. The whole area should go up, and I'll have all these comparable sales to get higher appraisals. That seems reasonable. So the second problem with what that creates is an issue, because now who am I going to sell these to for $200,000? Because I can't record it at $200,000 and then go and start selling them for $100,000, or even $110,000, because it'll bring the area back down. And now you've got these huge variable, this huge variation in sales price, and that causes more questions. So I have to sell them for $200,000. But if I record the values and if I can get them appraised for $200,000, I need to continue the sales for $200,000. So what I did was I thought, so who's going to buy them? No legitimate customer is going to buy them for that. Mm-hmm. So what do? What I decided was I would go ahead and I would just create my own buyers. That's easy enough. Like I figure I can do that, right? So I start creating. They call them synthetic identities, right? Mm-hmm. And there was no such thing as a synthetic identity back then. Like there wasn't a name for it. It was just, they were like, we called them phantom borrowers, So I figured out how to get Social Security to issue me Social Security numbers to children that don't exist, right? So like I would make a birth certificate for like a 10-month-old baby and make a shot record for that baby. And then I'd go into Social Security and tell them my child was born, but not at a hospital, with a midwife at home. And the pediatrician or whatever told me to go down with this and get a shot, and then Social Security issued, Social Security number issued, and then Social Security would say, well, he really should have done it, and I go, well, unless you told me to come down here and for you to do it,
yeah,
and they're like, well, okay, they'd look at it, and I'd fill out the SS5 form, they'd look at it, and they'd issue me a Social Security card. So I'd get the Social Security number, then I'd go online and I'd apply for a couple credit cards. I'd get denied. There's no credit history.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is a 10-month-old child. I'm saying it's like a 35-year-old man. Mm-hmm. Well, that creates a credit profile.
Yeah.
That credit profile is now live on the bureaus. So I don't get a credit card, obviously. I got turned down. They're saying there is no history of this person. But
it's locking in that this card
this person does exist. So there is a person with this name, this date of birth, this Social Security number that lives at this address, but they don't have any credit. Mm-hmm. But the profile now exists.
Okay.
And so if you apply with Bank of America, SunTrust, all these different banks, and they turn you down, eventually one of them says, hey, you know what, though? We won't give you a credit card, but we'll give you a secured credit card. Yeah. So if you put up $500 or $400, we'll give you a secured credit card. And you go, you know what, I'll do that. Mm-hmm. So I get 3 of those, one from Bank of America, one from First Premier Bank, one from Capital One, and I just made the payments. Well, after 6 months, I have 700 credit scores. Mm-hmm. You only needed at that time a 620 credit score to get a conventional loan. You need 3 trade lines and a 620 credit score. You had to be on your job for 2 years. You had to have 2 years residency. Prove that you've been somewhere for 2 years and been paying. Mm-hmm. And you have to have your down payment. Or if you own the house, you just have to have owned it. You could have owned it for a month. You can refinance it at whatever the price is you bought it for. So I start buying the houses in the names of these people.
That seems like an awful lot of to have to do prior. So here's my question.
A lot of setup.
Yeah, it's a lot of setup and a lot of maintenance to get that. And my question is, so what you're saying is you got these Social Security numbers. It doesn't register that. So when you go to apply for something, once you enter a date of birth of a 35-year-old, even though it doesn't, there's no the date of birth of a 10-month-old child is.
Yeah, but you're thinking what most people think, right? Do you really think that the Social Security Administration shares that information with the credit bureaus?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's the loophole,
right? They don't.
Okay.
The reason Equifax knows anything about you is because you told them.
Okay.
At some point, you applied for a credit card, legitimately.
Okay.
And they said
that's when they come. Oh, this person starts
Sean
their
Dustin
profile
with this date of birth, this Social Security number, and this address wants a credit card. Oh, you know what? He doesn't have any credit. No.
Okay.
Or it's a car. And they said, well, he doesn't have any credit, but he's putting down 30%. And they said, okay, give him. Does he have W-2s and pay stubs or pay stubs? Mm-hmm. Yes. Call and verify. Yes, he's got it. Okay, great. Give him a 22% interest rate and let him have the car, because even if he doesn't pay, he put down 30%. We'll get our money back when we take the car back. So they gave it to you.
Yeah.
And they reported. Now you've got a car loan.
Okay.
Then 2 months later, you applied for or suddenly you got something in the mail from Bank of America and it said, hey, he's pre-approved. You're pre-qualified and you for a credit card. You filled out the thing and you sent it in, and You got a $500 credit card. Now you have a credit card on your bureau.
Okay.
So it's all because of what you told them.
All right. So you hear that, people. So any of you future criminals out there that are going to do this, there's a loophole for you.
There's tons of loopholes. I mean, all these people that like all that setup, you need that setup. I needed that setup because you have to understand that once these guys, I was getting these guys to buy 5 and 6 houses.
Yeah.
So they're buying 5 houses in their name.
Okay.
I'm buying a house for $40,000 in a guy named Brandon Green's name. So Brandon Green now owns 4 houses that I bought for $40,000 and $50,000 a piece, but recorded the value at $200,000, $210,000, $205,000, $190,000. So it looks like he owns about $1 million in real estate. He's got 3 credit cards. He's got a 700 credit score. He's been on a job for 5 years. I can make the W-2s and pay stubs. You can call and verify his employment. Somebody answers the phone. Somebody verifies it. As far as he rents from this property management company, or I've got canceled checks or whatever. So he looks perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't even need a bank account. Not that I didn't have bank accounts for these guys, but I didn't need one because he owns the house already. So he just all I need is an appraiser to come out, take some pictures, and leave. I did my own appraisals because most of the houses we didn't even clean up inside. Like we would clean up the outside of the house, and I'd get my own appraiser to go out and do it, and I'd say, hey, you can't go in, or the appraiser knew me, and I was like, look, just take pictures of the outside, bro.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, no problem. And they'd say, hey man, this thing appraised for $210,000 or $190,000. I'd be like, okay, great. Oh, the guy just bought it for Matt. The guy just bought it for $195,000. I got it to appraise at $201,000. Okay, great. He's using the other comparable sales in the area that I created.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So now I can turn around and get a complete package on this guy, his appraisal, his W-2s and pay stubs, his canceled checks for his rent, right? Couple bank statements, send it all in, his credit report, send it all into Countrywide Bank, and Countrywide Bank says we'll lend him $180,000 on a piece of property. I have 40 for buying it, 10 for renovating the outside, cleaning up the outside. And that's all I've got in it.
So you're $50,000 in.
Yeah, I'm $50,000 in, and I get a loan for $180,000, and I make $130,000. Plus the guy's got, and I do this with 5 different houses. Plus he's got, by this point, I'm applying for credit cards. And of course, Countrywide, I always loved Countrywide because you would put down, or they would refinance you. And as soon as they refinanced you, they automatically would then have, like, the bank send you a pre-qualified thing saying, hey, you're pre-qualified for a $20,000 credit card. Yeah. Like, they know you just got a property, you refinance it, and it has $20,000 or $30,000 in equity. So here's a $20,000 credit card. Plus, of course, I have my other credit cards. And then I'd apply for a bunch of credit cards. I'd make a bunch of payments on all the houses for 2 or 3 months. And then I'd stop paying. So when they all went into foreclosure, I had pulled an article out of the Tampa Tribune where there was like a 10-car pileup or something, and someone had been life flighted to Tampa General Hospital. And I just retyped the article and put my guy's name in there as the guy that was life flighted. I'd then print out the article. I'd then write a letter from his sister, his fake sister. So I'd write a letter from his fake sister. So when the collection agency started writing letters, I'd send that letter to the collection agency saying, look, my brother was in a car accident. Here's a copy of the article. He was life flighted to Tampa General Hospital. The doctors say he's in a coma. Even if he comes out of the coma, he'll never work again. Just go ahead and take the house. And they take the house. They've got an explanation for what happened. That's it. It's over.
They didn't want to, That's pretty smart.
We did that for, I borrowed in the name of, 7 or 8 different guys. I borrowed $11.5 million. That's what the FBI said. So
wow. And how much time you get for that?
Well, I got for that. Then I took off on the run. Then eventually the FBI shows up, starts asking questions. I had another buddy who got caught in a bank committing bank fraud, and he worked with a task force. They told him, look, this is what I did, but I know about a guy. Here's what he's doing. So he works with a task force. They watch me. And keep in mind, I'm on federal probation. So they put together this task force, and once they've got it completely wrapped up, like, okay, we definitely know This is what's happening. This is who it is. They realize, okay, well, it's all over the place. Like, these are banks he's borrowing from, banks in California, in South Carolina, and like all these different banks. There's 40, 50, 60 banks he's involved with.
Yeah.
So they hand it to the FBI. And the FBI is about to come arrest me, and I have a buddy who's a sheriff's deputy who comes to me and says, listen, you're going to be arrested. He knows because he was dating a chick that was on the Tampa task force. So she tells him, your buddy Matt's going to be arrested. We just gave the task force all the information to the FBI. They're going to come get him in a couple of days. So he shows up and says, hey, man, they're going to come arrest you. So I take off on the run, of course, because that's the rational thing to do. That's what you do.
That's what all I did. But they were stupid enough to let me out 3 days after I got on an OR. After they blew the doors off and blew the windows out and came in to get me. So. Yeah,
I didn't want to stick around for that. That doesn't seem like, didn't seem like a good time to me. So I took off, and then, I took off, and I didn't have much money. I only had like a day's warning, so pulled out like $80,000. We probably had $1 million or so in the bank. Plus, we had at least $1 million or so in real estate that I owned.
Yeah,
at least $1 or $2 million. So I take off, and I go to Atlanta, Georgia. By this point, I figured out how to make driver's licenses or get the DMV to issue me a driver's license. I mean, I could get a driver's license. I've had 24 passports. Let me give you an example. I've had about 27 different IDs in 7 different states. I've had nearly 24 passports, been while on the run, in and out of the country as different people. I've been to Croatia, Italy, Greece. I've been to Bermuda, Jamaica, Mexico, all while on the run.
Okay.
So I take off, and I go to Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't have much money, so I rent a house from a guy worth about $200,000, and I go downtown to Public Records, and I satisfy the loans on the house. So I rented a house from you, let's say. I then go downtown, and I look up your house, your title. I see you've got two mortgages with the Bank of America. So I then do a satisfaction of mortgage from Bank of America. I make one, I forge one, and then I record it in Public Records. So it looks like those mortgages are paid off. So now you own that house free and clear. I then make an ID with your name. I then call multiple hard money lenders, and 3 of them, have them come out on different days. Each one says, I'll lend you $150,000. I then have a closing, like one on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with each one. They each lend me $150,000. I walk away with around $400,000. Pull out the money, pull it out in cash, take off. A couple weeks later, the Secret Service shows up. By that point, I was running another scam in South Carolina. I borrowed like $1.3 million in South Carolina. I ended up getting arrested in South Carolina. Wachovia Bank stumbled across what I was doing, and they actually grabbed me in the bank and handcuffed me.
Really?
They handcuffed me as Gary Sullivan. By this point, I was surveying homeless people and then getting driver's licenses in their name. So I bought 2 houses in the name Gary Sullivan. I borrowed $1.3 million. I'm pulling out money as Gary Sullivan.
Yeah.
Well, Wachovia figures it out. It's a little bit convoluted, but they end up accidentally figuring it out. And so they had me arrested. Like, the cops come in, they grab me, they arrest me, and I convinced them that the bank has made a mistake. Clearly the loan officers did something illegal here. Wasn't me. My name's Gary Sullivan, and they ran me through NCIC. I have no warrants. The cop doesn't really understand what's happening. The guy from Wachovia is screaming at him, telling him that my license or my ID that I have is in a real ID, and it was.
Yeah.
So he really screwed up when he said that.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, you're saying this isn't an ID, and this is an ID that was issued in South Carolina to Gary Sullivan. This is Gary Sullivan. There's no warrants. You're starting to sound like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because this is an ID. You're saying, it's not an ID. That's not a real ID. That's not really Gary Sullivan. It's a fake ID. And he's like, no.
It was issued because you went down and it was issued from DMV.
The problem was, in South Carolina, their IDs start with 000. And so he's from California. He thinks that doesn't look right. It's got to be a fake ID. It's like a 000044021. It's like, no, that's wrong. You're in California. Every fucking state has a different ID.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking? You know. Anyway, the point is, it doesn't look good for him. He doesn't believe him. He makes a mistake. They bring me downtown. I fill out a report that let me go. I get in my car. I go to 2 more banks, pull out some more money, and leave. What happened then? Then I went to North Carolina.
But at this point, you're on the run, so you're like, I don't
3 years.
Like, I don't give a fuck. I mean, when you catch me, you're going to catch me, and whatever happens, happens.
Oh, I've in Charlotte. The U.S. Marshals almost caught me in Charlotte. They actually showed up at my apartment complex. Once again, just a fluke. Turns out that the cop in South Carolina had gotten my tag number to a vehicle I had registered in somebody else's name in Charlotte, North Carolina. So they tell the FBI, Secret Service, they tell the U.S. Marshals track it back. Go to my apartment complex. I happen to be in a Starbucks across the street. People in my apartment complex, the leasing agents, had just been interviewed by the U.S. Marshals, walked across the street where I was and see me. They run back across the street to tell the U.S. Marshals. By that point, I get in my car, and I happen to look behind me as the marshals are running at my car, and one of the guys from the apartment complex is screaming, he's right here, and I take off. Boom. I went straight to a homeless facility and interviewed 3 more guys and got another ID. Within a week, I have a new ID. I go to Nashville, rent an apartment, start a business, a fake business, buy a bunch of houses, borrow $3.5 million. So my girlfriend, the chick I'm dating at the time, I meet this chick and we start sleeping with this other girl. That girl ends up finding out who I am. We knew Dateline was about to come out. You have to understand, at this point, there's been like 50, 60 articles. Like, I've been in the Chicago Tribune, I've been in the Tampa Tribune, I've been in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There's articles everywhere. Fortune magazine had come out. I was in Bloomberg, did a couple articles. So I'm about to be on Dateline. I'm just like, I got to get out of the country for good. Pulling money out, I'm going to take off. My girlfriend ends up telling the girl we're sleeping with what I'm about to do. She calls, and who I really am. She calls the Secret Service. Secret Service comes and arrests me.
Did she get a reward?
She was supposed to get like $10,000. I don't think she ever got the $10,000 because the girl that I got caught, another chick that I had taken off with, who had been caught before me. She told me that she was trying to get her parents to pay like $10,000, and her parents wouldn't pay for it. I always thought she got the $10,000. Because I'd heard she had done it for a $10,000 reward, when in fact she never got the money.
So I mean, that's kind of stupid, because if that person really, like, you would have, you would have given her $20,000.
Oh, 20! I'd have given her $500,000. I'd have given her all the cash we had.
Yeah,
like, just give me a 10-minute head start. Like, I can't stay here now. You know who I am. I know this is something you're thinking about. Here's the money. Don't say anything. And then I, of course, pack my bags and leave. Yeah. She could call 20 minutes later. I just need a head start. I just need to get out of your line of sight, and I'm gone. I mean, I already had false passports, and when they called me, I had like 6 passports in different names.
So how high up on the most wanted list did you end up?
I was on the FBI's most wanted list. I was on the U.S. Marshals most wanted list, and I was number 1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list.
Wow!
I think Danny on Koncrete said that I was. He said, like, I was number 1 on the FBI's most wanted list, and he just got it wrong.
Yeah.
But it's funny because now everybody uses that. Number 1 on the FBI's what? No.
Yeah.
I was number 1 on the Secret Service, but whatever.
Yeah, that's who screwed me, was the Secret Service. I was telling you the story.
Right.
And everything that I was doing was like small potatoes, right?
Right.
Nothing even close to like what you were doing or what Boziak was doing. I was on like the little guy, like almost getting my feet wet in that pond to maybe be able to do bigger things like that, but never got around to it. Like, I did
drugs involved. It's you're getting enough money to get the drugs, to then turn around and do it again, get drugs. It's just it begins this cycle. Like, most of the guys I know that had potential to do a larger scheme, not that it's a good thing, but that had the potential to do it. If there were drugs were involved, they never even get off the ground, because it's simply, the crime is just a a means to obtain drugs.
Yeah.
It's just a cycle. So you just never really go anywhere as a result.
Yeah.
So anyway, but you were saying, sorry.
No. You're right. You're right. I was, doing a habit and trying to support a habit and a habit for a girl too. And, the one thing that I did realize though, that I was different than everybody else is that I was undiagnosed ADHD. So when I would do meth, I would zero in on stuff and I would complete it and like run at it, stay up 3 days at a time until I completed what I was trying to do. And then, go on. But I mean, I never really, you can't, like I did some cool things, but at the same time, I just never really like shot out.
Right.
Just because of the addiction and everything else that was involved with it. Like I remember I was doing this stuff that you're talking about, like making pay stubs and all the other things, but I was doing it to get into like renting houses.
Yeah, I think lots of people do that to qualify for a house or to qualify for an apartment or to get a car. Like lots of people will make pay stubs to get like whatever.
It's not hard.
It's not hard now.
Learn how to work Photoshop.
Right. Yeah, it's not that. Well, I mean, you can go on like there's all these pay stub generators now. Like you can do all kinds of stuff now.
Yeah.
It was more difficult then. I remember initially I was actually cutting and pasting together the actual pay stubs, and then I got was it?
So you were doing manually.
Oh yeah, initially, like because most of the time, like my customers would come and they have a W-2. It's just they made $42,000 last year, and if they made $47,000, they get a loan.
Yeah.
But like Quicken and those types of that software started coming out. And so then I switched to that software to where I just start typing in the numbers and doing it that way. It's the same thing. Like I initially was making these making bank statements I would clone bank statements for, let's say, SunTrust Bank or Bank of America or someone like that. And then I got to the point where, and because typically if they get the original bank statements, the lender doesn't call the bank. Well, I have his original bank statements. So I would actually white it out, Bank of America bank statements, SunTrust, credit union, all kinds of different bank statements. Like I had probably 7 or 8 different types. Whited out all the information and then made copies of them, color copies. And then I would have templates on my computer, and I could change it to whatever I wanted and print it out on the on the color copy, so it looks like real bank statements, like they're in color. And so you fold them up, and I would have the envelopes, and you put them in the envelope, and you tear up the envelope, and so take this and send it to the lender. The lender would call us and say, "Hey, you sent us his original, bank statements." And we go, "Oh gosh, I can't. But we must have. Sorry, the secretary or the processor made a mistake. Go ahead and send those back." But they've seen them, and so they would make a copy and they'd stamp like certified copy. So they don't call the lender to say, "Hey," or the lender doesn't call the bank to say, "Is the money really there, or does he have an account?"
Yeah.
Why would I? Just saw his original bank statements. Of course he does.
Yeah,
original bank statements. So, but then I got to the point where I was like, this is getting to be a problem because, every once in a while they might call. What if they do call? It could be an issue. So, or we'd have them call and they would say, "Hey, did he have this much? Is his average balance this last month?" And they would say, "No." Well, what was it close? No, because this is what I have. Nope, not even close. Okay, thank you. And they'd hang up the phone and they'd look, I don't know what's going on. And of course I immediately go, Are you suggesting that my customer gave me bad information? I can't I didn't do it. My customer gave it to me. That's crazy. So I was like, this is an issue. So then I went ahead and I started making online bank accounts.
No, I was dude, that was funny. I looked at it. Right?
I know. Just as soon as you looked away, it cut off. So then I ended up making online banks. So I started making like Southern Exchange Bank of, Clarksville, or Bank of Ybor, right? And then you could go to I would clone a bank website, and I just change all the names, make it very simple, like a 4 or 5 page, website. So you could actually go to the Bank of Ybor. There was a Bank of Ybor. It said it on I started making my own bank statements. I just played with it in Photoshop and created my own template and put the Bank of put the actual website and the whole thing. And so now the underwriter can actually go to the bank, then go to the website, and they can call the number that's online. Well, that's me.
Yeah, it goes to you.
Right. So now I'm answering the phones myself or my secretary, or we're returning the calls ourselves, and we're absolutely he has $4,500 in the bank. Yeah, no, that's what he had last month. Absolutely. And the month before that, it was $4,232.
Yeah.
And so that I started doing that instead, and that helped. I mean, plus then the other thing was, when I started making my own fake people, it just everything became fake. Like their businesses are fake, everything's fake. Started buying businesses like businesses that have been around for 7 or 8 years. People had stopped paying, like they'll stop paying their yearly fee, and then so after 3 years, that corporation is now available to be purchased, but you have to pay the back fee.
Yeah.
So you have to pay like $700. So I pay $700, but I now get a company that's seasoned. It's been around for 7 or 8 years. Somebody bought it, ran it for 4 years, stopped making the payments. Obviously, they don't do that anymore. They let it go into default or go inactive. I now catch those payments up. When you look at my tax ID number, it looks like I've owned the place for 7 years.
How'd you figure out all this stuff?
Just little slowly over time. Just trial and error, getting caught, getting around it, talking to underwriters, talking to, different people. You just slowly figure it out. And then as other people get caught, you find things out. Like, some account executive would come in and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, did you hear what happened over at, Mile Street Mortgage?" You go, "No, what happened?" "You can't believe this. Here's what they were doing." And you're like, "Oh, is that possible? How'd they catch them?" "Well, they caught them because of this." And you go, "Oh, so that's how they check that?" "Yeah, they check this and this. So if they'd actually registered it here, we wouldn't have never known."
Oh, put that in the bank.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Note to self.
That's funny.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, what was the coolest thing that you did with the money that you stole?
Everybody says that, bro. I didn't do anything. Like, I literally didn't. Everybody's always like, "Well, I talked to a guy the other day. He's like, 'What kind of car were you driving?' I mean, not like an Audi. Not like an Audi, like an RS whatever, 300,000, like a $100,000 Audi."
So you looked like you were living within your means.
Absolutely.
And
I'm not flashy.
Not flashy, flaunting.
"Oh, where'd you live?" I typically lived in the same areas I'm flipping houses. Or I'd live downtown, like in downtown Charlotte. I lived in downtown Charlotte. In a condo that's probably worth $1 million now, but back then it was probably worth $500,000. So it was a nice condo. But it wasn't flashy. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't a penthouse. It was just like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. It's nice. It was nice, but I'm not that guy. If you gave me $10 million, I'm not going to be driving a Lamborghini tomorrow. I'm just not. I'm not going to drive a Lamborghini. I'm going to drive something that's nice, but probably still not going to spend $100,000 on a vehicle. I might get a Range Rover. Probably get a Range Rover.
Range Rover.
Yeah, but that's not going to be outrageous, and nobody's really going to look, and they don't look much different than a Cherokee.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to scream, especially at that time. That's the problem. Some guy robs a bank and gets $5 million, and the next thing you know, he's driving a Ferrari and living in a $2 million house, and his kids are going to private school, and he's wearing gold, and he's taking vacations and buying everybody he knows drinks. And where'd you get the money? "Oh, I won it at Vegas," or I won the lottery, or any other number of things. Gee, that's funny, because you got all this money, started spending all this money, that 2 days after, that bank was robbed. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's the guy, "Oh, that wasn't me." People are just stupid.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like, think about the people that have, like, I've met a lot of people that were wealthy, and you would never know that they were wealthy.
Oh, yeah. Every hard money, the hard money guys have got like $500,000, $1 million, $2 million to lend. So every one of those guys I've met, they're always driving like a 5-year-old vehicle. They're wearing old blue jeans and faded shirts, and you always look at them. You're like, you look like you're homeless. Like you don't look like they're not flashy. They're that's how you make your money. You don't spend a lot. You're humble, and you're and you're patient, and you work hard, and you're smart with your money, and that's how you keep it.
Yeah, for sure. So when you go to prison, and this is the interesting part to me when you're there, how do you get involved in writing books? Because I counted them, and you've written like 10 or 12 different stories from guys that like you have 12 books, right? Or 10?
No, I have like about 20 different stories, but physical books like on Audible and on Amazon that you can buy, there's 7.
7? Okay. So, because I looked at your YouTube page, and you have some of those on there, and I was counting different people that.
No, what I have on there is I have those are just some of the stories.
Yeah.
Those are synopses of some of the stories. So it's a short version of the story that I put up so that people can, you don't want to buy it and listen to it 10 hours or read a 300-page book, but you want to hear the story, and maybe you heard me talk about it. Well, in an hour, I'll tell you the story. I give you like an abridged version of the story within an hour. And it's free, and you can go on YouTube and listen to them on my channel, which is Inside True Crime.
Okay. And so these are stories from guys that you were locked up with, and how did that all transpire? Did you just started hearing stories and go, "Hey, man, this is an interesting story"?
No, I'd been on Dateline and I'd been on American Greed, and so guys are seeing this, and guys are saying, and guys in prison, you hear lots of stories, and so guys are telling me, you ought to write your own. They're like, you ought to write a book. You ought to write a book. You ought to write a book.
Yeah.
And so I decided, finally I said, well, I am going to write a book. So I go ahead and I'm going to write it. So I wrote my story. And then when I was finishing my story, there was a guy, everybody started reading my story, right? So I just had the manuscript, but guys are reading it. They're passing it around.
Yeah.
And so, and I'd been in, by that point, I'd been in like Playboy magazine, and I'd been in Fortune and Forbes. I'd been in a bunch of these different magazines, had done articles on me.
And that's while you're in prison?
While I'm in prison. Okay. So I wrote my story called Shark in the Housing Pool, and I started letting guys read it. Well, this guy showed up. I'd read an article in Rolling Stone magazine called, it was called Dudes in Ammo, or I forget. It was about these two Jewish stoner kids in Miami that were selling ammunition. And so, Arms and Dudes. It was in Rolling Stone. So, one of the guys shows up at Coleman, and his name's Ephraim Deveroli, and so he was played by Jonah Hill in the movie War Dogs.
Okay.
Well, he showed up, and I'd read this article on him, and I went and I saw him, and I said, "Hey, man, I read that article in Rolling Stone." He's like, "Yeah. Oh, and I said, "Well, look, have you thought about writing a book, like a memoir?" He's like, "Nah, I'm ADHD. I could never do that, and it's too much." Yeah, same thing. I've heard it. Same thing you said.
Yeah, right.
So he's like, "Yeah, I can't." I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's not hard. You just have to write an outline, and that you could take a month to do that if you want, and then slowly write the stories, and before you know it, it'll be done." "Nah, I don't have time for all that." And he was like, "I really just want it to all go away." Yeah, right? Yeah. It was in the Rolling Stone, but it wasn't a movie. So I was like, okay. So anyway, a couple months later, he finds out that the story got sold. The Rolling Stone story got sold. So he says, so we start talking, and he says, "Look, I convince him to write a book." So I ended up writing his story. It's called Once a Gun Runner. I ended up writing his story, and after I write that one, the movie War Dogs, he gets out, and War Dogs comes out, which was based on the article.
Okay.
He then sues them and sues Warner Brothers and tells Warner Brothers that they got a hold of his manuscript, which they actually did. And they settle with him. I get out and sue Deveroli because he never paid me. So I sue him. He pays me. But in the meantime, after he left, when he was leaving prison, I was approached by a guy named Marcus Schrinker, and I write his story. He says, "Hey, man, you might want to write my story next. I don't know what you're doing." I was like, "Yeah, let me hear your story." So I write his story. It's a story called Bailout. What is this, 37 minutes? Nice. So then I wrote a story called, it was called Oxy Rush. It ended up being Generation Oxy. And it was these kids, Doug Dodd and a bunch of other kids that were selling oxycodone here in Hudson, Florida.
Okay.
and they were doctor shopping and selling oxycodone, and then they start shipping it to the colleges. Like all of his buddies, his high school buddies, they were all wrestlers, and they end up, like 3 or 4 of them get scholarships to different colleges. So he stays and runs this little enterprise, and he ships all the pills up to them, and they ship money back in like teddy bears.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a whole thing. It's a ridiculous ring. It's a bunch of clean cut, kind of trailer park trash, kind of white kids, you know, selling oxys. And I end up getting them into Rolling Stone magazine, get an article written on Rolling Stone magazine. We option the film rights to the story. And I end up getting a book deal from Skyhorse Publishing. So I write that book. Then I wrote Bent, which is John Boziak's story.
Yeah.
Then I wrote. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You know, I mean, I wrote like 20 some odd stories. Some of them I ended up writing full length books. Some just ended up being, 10 or 15,000 word stories.
So Boziak is actually a book.
It's a book and a synopsis. I have his synopsis is on my website. And
you're actually doing something bigger with that too, right?
Yeah, we there's a production company. They did a sizzle reel with him. So the sizzle reel was done. A sizzle reel is what you make before you actually make a film. So there was a sizzle reel done, and now they're shopping it to actually get it turned into a full-length hybrid documentary, like a docudrama where they have reenactments and everything cut with interviews with him and other people that were involved. And that looks like that's going to happen. I have another story that I'm also doing, another one of my stories. There's supposed to be a sizzle reel done on 2 other ones, too, that are supposed to be done. So, I'm doing that, and I paint. And so, anyway, by the time I got out of prison, I had all these books that were written.
Yeah.
And so I got out, and of course, you can have it written. Now it's still difficult. Now you have to get it, you're walking out with a manuscript. So then I have to retype everything, or I have to have typed. Some of them I typed while I was in prison. You have to put it all back together. You have to get the book published. So that's what I've been doing since I got out, and I got out less than 2 years ago, and I've put almost all of them are on Amazon at this point.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, it's a struggle, but I mean, I'm putting it all together, so it's working out. So it might work out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a struggle, but you're doing what you want to do.
Oh, yeah. I could have easily gotten out and gone and got a job making $50,000 or $100,000 or something. I've had guys offer me. I have a buddy that offered me a job that would have paid me about $80,000. The problem with that job is I would have had to go on to Seattle, Washington.
Yeah.
And my mom lives in Tampa, so I can't. Well, and 2, I'd be working 40 hours a week. So how do I work a normal job 40, 50 hours a week and still be able to do all these other things that I'm trying to do?
Can't.
All right. So instead what I did was I started painting. I have a degree in fine arts from USF, so I started doing pop art. And so I paint during the day, which allows me to, if I paint for 4 hours and then suddenly I need to go and, suddenly Tyler says, hey, there's this guy. Here's who he is. He's coming into town. Do you want to do an interview with him? He wants to do a podcast. I can say, yeah, sure. What time? Okay, we'll schedule it. I can leave in the middle of the day. Yeah. I can drive here to St. Pete. I can do a podcast with you. I can go back. I can paint for 2 more hours. Like, my mom says, can you come over tonight? Sure. I put down the paintbrush. I go over there. I come back. So I'm working at my own leisure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm still working 50 hours a week, at least 50, 60 hours a week, to be honest. But it's just all over the place.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've been doing with this podcast. So like for the last year, I've been on temporary disability getting paid really well because I went and got the job, right? I was in the construction industry,
right.
Commercial construction union, and making great money. But the problem is that 10 to 12 to 14 hours of my day are committed to commuting, the job, all of this stuff, and it doesn't really leave much time to do anything else.
Right.
And so I was able to focus 100% on this podcast for the last year, and that's over now. This is the surgery that I had on it, and now I'm going back to real work, and I was supposed to go back on the 1st of May, and then I ended up breaking my toes. And it pushed me back out. And so it's like, oh man. So I couldn't catch a break. But at some point I'm going to have to go back, and I've been trying to pivot out of that and set up everything this last year to get out of doing that. Because once I do that, all my time and everything else is going to go back away.
Right.
And so it's just, it's not really what I want to be doing. Right. And so I built the nonprofit, trying to do that, trying to get all that situated, because at some point I'll take a salary from that when money starts flowing in. It's not going to be a lot of money, but it'll be some. And then the income streams coming from over here. So I wish that I would have done it a little bit better, but I didn't know what I was doing. Right.
Yeah.
And so basically just figuring things out, throwing darts, see what sticks. If it doesn't, all right, move on to something else. So, I mean,
yeah, that's like I wish if I'd known 2 years ago like how things worked and what how to monetize certain things, then I would have started way earlier and done a lot. It's trial and error.
Yeah,
and there's nobody really there to help you along the way.
Yeah.
So like when I did that, I did the first podcast I did was with Danny and Koncrete. Mm-hmm. If I'd known now, I would have immediately started a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
And started recording stuff. But instead, by the time I actually decided, hey, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, I'm going to start doing my own videos, I already had 1,000 subscribers. Guys were just subscribing to my channel that had no content on it at all. So, I started with 1,000 subscribers, and then I had to get the 4,000 hours of watch time to get monetized, and that took a while. But had I known then what I know now, I would have had all that done in 2 weeks or a month.
Yeah,
I would have been great. But instead, I waited and waited and waited because I didn't. First of all, I got out of prison. I mean, the technology is just overwhelming compared to when I went in. When I went into prison, the coolest phone that was out there was called the Razor. Remember the Razor?
Yeah, I remember the Razor.
The Razor, and at that point, you could actually watch TV on your phone. So you could actually pull up, like watch the news, and it would play like for 4 seconds, and then it would go, it'd loop.
Load, buffer.
Load, buffer. And then you pay for 5 or 6 seconds and buffer.
Yeah.
Buffer. And it was like, and I was just like, man, oh my God, you can. They're like, yeah, but it's so. I know, but my God, look at this thing. Look, it's amazing.
Yeah, look what you can do.
Texting had just come out.
Yeah.
So, by the time I get jammed up and then I get out of prison 12 and a half years later, and it's insane. It's insane what the phones can do. Like it's like magic.
Yeah, it is. They're people. I remember everybody's. Oh, they're going to track you. They're going to track you. Everybody's being tracked. If you got a fucking smartphone, you're being tracked.
Well, who cares? If don't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
If the only time you need to worry about it is if you're doing something wrong. Oh, I don't want them reading my stuff and my personal stuff. And I get that. That's fine. You're right, and it's invasive and it's ridiculous. But the truth is, stop caring about don't talk to people, that you don't want to, don't say things you don't want people to hear, and don't do things you don't want people to know about. And, I have such little concern for what other people think of me. I could care less. Like, there's not much I'm not going to say directly to your face that I'll say behind your back, or not much I will say about my girlfriend that I wouldn't say if she was sitting in the room, or friends or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, that's just how I am. Most people are like that. They're
hiding something.
Oh yeah, they're concerned they've got some sex slave chained up in the basement or something they don't want anybody to know about. And I get that. Obviously you want to keep that under wraps.
Yeah.
So I get it. You don't want anybody to know. That's fine.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to know that your crazy little things that you do when nobody's looking.
It's fine. Did you? I remember there was a Law and Order that was based on a case where this couple had kidnapped like a 14 or 15-year-old girl and kept her in a box underneath their bed for like a year.
That was real?
It was like a real thing that it was based on. Like all those Law and Orders are semi-based on real cases. Like it was like it was like a sex slave. Like they would take her out, and the husband would go to work and come back. He was an extreme control nut. Yeah. And he would come back, and then they'd take her out of the box and wash her and put her back in the box. And she was just terrified. Like she'd lay in the box all day, and then they'd take her out at night and have sex with her, put her back in the box and feed her and put her,
That's crazy.
You think she's got some issues?
I'm sure she does. You remember that J.C. Dugard?
Which one? What was that?
She was the one that was being held in Antioch, California, which was like close to where I live. And like nobody knew, and she'd been stolen, and like they had kids with her, and
oh yeah, she was in the house, right? Like they had kept her in the basement. Was it just her? I thought it was a couple girls.
I don't know if I know. I remember, but I remember they had kids with her.
Yeah,
and he ended up knocking her up.
Yeah, didn't like one of the kids, a couple of the kids died or something like that, or
I don't know.
Is
what
that the same case?
I can't remember what the whole story is, but I know it was like JC something.
Human beings are just despicable. They're just we're a horrible species. We really are. Like it wouldn't be like a huge shame if we just died out completely. It wouldn't be like it's just disgusting. We're just cruel and horrible to each other.
Yeah, no, that's true. And everything is pushed through money and greed and all of the stuff. And nobody ever talks about the low lights, which really help people. Everybody's always showing their highlights and talking about their best parts of their lives.
Yeah, the Instagram life.
Yeah, the Instagram life. But nobody really wants to talk about like what are we struggling with? And stuff like that. Like I come from more of a trauma-based background, but a lot of it was my own doing. And most of the things that I went through, I mean, aside from, the divorce and all the stuff that, caused me to go the direction that I did and, being not supervised, a latchkey kid and all those other things that kind of helped to go along with that. But most of anything that I went through was by my own doing. The decisions that I made to go down these roads and not want to get a job and like everything, like kind of like when Boziak was.
I watched one of your podcasts where you're like, I was doing anything I could to not get a job, a real job.
Yeah, right. It's just because I was lazy. I didn't want to go fucking work. I didn't want to do this, and so I would create all these things. And that's why I asked you, like, God, you did a whole lot of for this, because in my experience, most of the stuff that I did and all of the running around to try to get out of doing work,
it was a lot of work.
Was a lot of work. Like if I would have just went to work, I'd have probably made the same amount of money.
Yeah, but if I'd gone to work, I wasn't going to make $15 million.
But for me, it was I wasn't making that kind of.
It was
money.
It was a lot of work, but it was a big payoff. It was.
A lot of my payoffs were dealt with, strippers and banging chicks and, drugs and, living that life and, being the guy, the man, whatever. It was just this whole fucking false reality.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, right? Gotta love strippers. Anyways.
It's going to play well.
But, I mean, I'm pretty honest about how I used to be. And from being an abusive person to like all the things that played out, like there's not much that I won't like disclose about my life and in the past and like the person that I was.
I think I don't mind disclosing because I'm such a selfish, narcissistic prick that I just don't care what anybody else thinks about me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just horrible. Like, I'll say whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm just not concerned about, And my girlfriend just laughs all the time. She's just not laughing, more like shakes her head, like just like, I can't believe you just said that. I'm like, what? What's wrong with that? She's like, that's the problem. You have no idea what you just said.
You have no filter.
Yeah. Oh, I hear that all the time.
Filter.
No filter.
Well, we need one of these for your mouth.
Why would
or
I?
Your thoughts.
That's how I feel. This is the way it is. That's it. Yeah, good times.
So what's next for you? I mean, you're getting into all this stuff, or you just
working on this stuff. I'm hoping to do a bunch of sizzle reels on the true crime stories I've written. I'd like to get some documentaries made. My hope and desire is that those documentaries end up spinning off into series. Boziak's story would make an amazing series.
Yeah.
I've got another one called It's Insanity. It would make an amazing series. So would and there's some of them that I have that are really they're not going to make great series. They're like Bailout. It's a beginning, middle, and end. There's one I have called Cash Logistics, which is about a guy that went and got a job working at Cash Logistics. It's like Loomis Fargo, or Brinks, where they move money. So he went and got a job there, became a manager, and then had the place robbed. So I mean, it's like a lot of forethought and work, and had the place robbed. And then the guys that he set up to rob him, then gave him a couple $100,000. They're supposed to give him a couple $1 million. They kept all the money, and when him and his buddy started complaining about it, they murdered his buddy and tried to murder him, but didn't get him.
Yeah.
And then eventually they all get busted. He doesn't say anything about the guys that murdered him or murdered his buddy or robbed the place. He keeps his mouth shut, and they turn on him. And he ends up getting 22 years. So I'm saying but that's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's no series there. So some of the stories are just, that's what it is. I have a story called Atonement. Same thing. There's a beginning, and there's a first act, a second act, and a third act. That's it. That's all there is. Like, there's no series here. So I want to get these stories made into, some of them documentaries, and some it'd be great if they turned into series. And I think the best way to do that is to get some kind of a documentary done first, and then see if there's interest. And if there's interest, then you spin it off into then you can turn around and go back and make an attempt to say, hey, wouldn't this make a great series? Kind of like The Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
Made a decent book, turned it into an amazing series. That's what you have. You have to create the intellectual property and the interest before you can kind of make that leap to get them to go with a series.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to do. And in the meantime, I'm painting and I'm selling books. Like, painting, the fact that I'm making a living painting and selling books is insane. Like, that I never thought that was a thing. 2 years ago, when I was laying in my bunk, in prison, imagining that I would be able to actually feed myself doing this, that's insane. That never even occurred to me.
Yeah.
That it was actually where I just assumed I was gonna be getting some job selling cars or working at FedEx or Walmart or something. I mean, I just figured I'll do that, and then I'll try and do this on the side, and that was it. That was my goal. It just didn't. It ended up not working out that way, and worked out way better. And I think I'm making headway.
So do you feel like, because I from everything that you've explained, I mean, and even kind of like in my own situation, like, I feel like I'm almost there, turning a corner. Right?
I felt like, listen, just before COVID, I was in negotiations with a company called Blumhouse. They make like Handmaid's Tale. They did the movie Get Out. They did the movie Invisible Man. Like, you see them everywhere. Like, there's a huge production company. And they make movies. They make series for like Hulu and Netflix. Well, I was in negotiations with them to actually, I was about to go out to Las Vegas. So about to go out to LA and meet with them about doing a series based on me being in prison writing these guys' stories, kind of like Orange is the New Black. And I was supposed to fly out there, and 2 weeks before I was supposed to get on the plane, COVID hit. They closed LA down. And then it became, okay, well, in a couple months, and then we they were like, well, let's keep the momentum going, and we'll have this, we'll do a Zoom, and we did a Zoom, and then we do another Zoom, and then we have a couple phone calls, and we got to wait. Production got shut down. We're waiting for production. And then 6 months later, it's like, look, we're shelving it. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's just everything is chaos. And so we can't be taking on all these new projects. We can't even film at this point. We're not going to get into a contract and sign everything and start writing we don't even know when we're going to be doing production. And when we do production, it's making up for the last 6 months. So it just never happened. And I know, like, I have a guy who kind of like my agent, kind of a guy named Davey Rothbart. He's like, it'll probably work out, and we'll revisit it when this is over, and we'll this, and then it's like, it's not going to happen, bro. Forget it. Yeah. But now things are starting to happen again. Like, now other production companies are coming to me, and they're saying, hey, let's do this. What about this? What about this story? Let's not do you and all the stories. Let's go individually and hit the stories, and then we can always go back and do, absolutely. That's really the way I wanted to go. Really want to get the stories made first, then go back and do my story. Like, I don't want to do my story first. My fear of doing my story first is this. If we were to do Shark in the Housing Pool, like my story, being on the run, what happens is then you become Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Like, he walks in the room, he can't walk in the room and pitch a story that he wrote. Because all people can see is, hey, you're Jordan Belfort. You're the Wolf of Wall Street. Oh, yeah, well, I loved that one scene when you were doing blow off the hooker's ass. Oh, my God. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute.
You upstage everything.
Yeah, I have a story here. I wrote this story. Oh, and what do you want to do? Like they're never going to take him serious. He's now pigeonholed. He can't get out. He's typecast. That's who he is.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I want to be able to, if I get a few of my stories made, then I can walk in the room and say, look, I've done this and done this and then this, and I have a series. I'd like to do my story now.
Yeah.
Now it's another story, and it's not just all about me. Yeah. And trust me, everything about my narcissism doesn't want it to go that way, but that's the smart move. Like, I want it to be like, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
But yeah. I have to, to work. I have to suffer through it.
Dude, I relate to that quite a bit because it's. We all have. If you've been in any kind of things like we've done,
right.
There is narcissism there.
Oh, it has to be, right?
And it just depends on the level of it, right? Like the thing that saved me from being a complete sociopathic narcissist was I had empathy, and so I would feel bad for the people that I would hurt. And most of the time, it took me being on drugs to forget about the people that I hurt and to continue. But once I stopped, it was like, oh man, fuck, dude, I got to deal with this or that. And so that was kind of like my saving grace. And having my daughter was really what kind of, not the first one, but the second one that I was actually.
The first one didn't help at all.
No, the first one.
I know you. I actually saw the story where you were, where you talked about, you were on drugs. And,
yeah.
So.
And so, I looked at it as like, oh, dude, go ahead. I don't have to pay child support now. And if my daughter,
I think that comes with age. Too.
Sees this. It's not that I didn't care. It's just I thought that was best for me and my situation at the time, and for me to continue doing drugs and partying and living the life that I wanted to. And at some point, we've made, she's gotten in contact with me, and we text every now and then. And at some point, we'll end up meeting, but that's just how life was. And it's really difficult sometimes. And when I started the podcast, I had to have a come to Jesus moment with myself and go, look. How are you? This cannot be about you.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you're talking to these people, when you're interviewing these folks you're getting their stories, stay the fuck out of the way. Get out of the way.
Right.
Stop talking about yourself or trying to interject. And so it was something I had to learn. I had to learn how to conversate. I had to learn how to listen. I had to learn how to relate, but not too much.
Yeah.
And so, and that's the beginning of what I was doing. I was learning, and, now I'm here, and Tyler's, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully
Tyler's awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll get some bigger things out of this, and my story will get some traction, and maybe I'll end up writing a book at some point.
It's not that it's not hard. It's just, it's a learned behavior. You just have to, if you can just sit down and write an outline, you take a month to write an outline. You just write an outline, a good solid outline. Then you just have to follow it. It's just like following a map. You just have to say, okay, right here I'm supposed to write about this. Might be 3 pages you might write, might be 1 page. And then you write the next thing. Okay, there you scratch that out. Now I'm going to write this. And you'd be shocked. 6 months later, you're not even putting a lot of time into it. 6 months later, you turn around and you're like, I got a 300-page book here. What just happened? How did this just creeped up on me? I'm at the end. Now, you might have to go back and tighten some things up or rearrange some things or read it and say, you know what, this story doesn't add to... there's tons of stories I never told, I didn't write down.
Yeah.
But it's like, sometimes I wrote several stories that I got rid of because it was... the whole story didn't further the overall arc of the book. And I realized I only wrote it because it makes me look really cool. And it's like, am I writing this to let everybody know how smart I am? Is that what I did here? Because this doesn't... I've already talked about how I've done this over and over again. Now, why am I writing? Oh, because here, this happened, and look how smart you are that you actually got around this and did this. I'm like, yeah, but I've already done that. It's like, now you're just bragging. It's not... You're not... So it's like, okay, you know what? So you have to condense this 2 pages into a paragraph or get rid of it altogether. And that's the hard part. The hard part is editing. It's kind of editing. It's getting it. Well, sorry, the hard part is really getting it down. Editing it is easy, but then at least you can kind of tweak it. Really, the hard part is looking at that blank page, but editing it is easier. I made a mistake there, but it's definitely editing is easier. Yeah. To me, editing is way easier than writing. But if you can get into that spot and start writing, then you can kind of tweak it by editing.
So I think I've got about 3 books in my story. All right.
Yeah, everybody says that.
And so what I did is the best rendition so far of an interview that I've done has been 3.5 hours. And so I want to use that, transcribe it, and then add in the pieces that I didn't tell.
But a 300-page book is about 10 hours.
Oh, fuck.
So you've got, well, it doesn't matter. If you write it down, it's going to be a lot longer. Mm-hmm. The point is you probably have one book. And you don't want to, I always have to talk to these guys like, no, I got a memoir on me. It's going to be 3 memoirs. Okay, well, you don't reinvent the wheel. Write a 250 to 300-page book down. If it's suddenly amazing, you can go back and rewrite it and blow it up into multiple books. Mm-hmm. But, honestly, if you end up part 1, part 2, part 3, you're basically asking people to buy a 900-page book. Nobody's buying a 900-page book. Not unless it's fiction and it's, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but anyways, do what you want.
Good information. I'll tell you. No, you've done it. You've done it, and so I'm going to listen to you. But us narcissistic type of people like to inflate things.
Well, the other thing is that you can get to that point where it's this in and of itself. Look, me prior to prison is a story in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Me in prison is another story. Mm-hmm. So there really are 2 books there.
Yeah.
But that in prison book is really broken up between all of my stories. Like, not all of them, but about 4 different stories I'm kind of interwoven in.
Okay.
So really my story is like 5 stories. Yeah. You could think of it like that, but interwoven in with these other guys' stories and what was happening at that time with me. But regardless, yeah, your story is up to prison and then a brief synopsis of prison and then walking out and starting over. You've got a whole story of redemption.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
So, well, good information.
Are we done here?
Are we
wrapping
done
up here?
Yeah, we're done. We're good. We're
can't wait
hour
to
and 24.
Can't wait to drive into 5 o'clock traffic.
Oh shit, that's right. I'm still on West Coast time.
That's fine.
But yeah, let's go ahead and plug anything that you. What?
You're not going to do the whole. If you like the video, you don't do that. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to follow me. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to no, you don't do the leave a comment for the algorithm. None of that.
No, I don't give a fuck about YouTube.
No.
I'm buried.
What about your podcast? Make sure to can they subscribe to the podcast?
Oh, people can subscribe to the podcast.
But you got to say make sure if you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to look in the description. Make sure to support me. Go to my Patreon. You don't have Patreon?
I have a Patreon, but I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. I got a couple of people on there.
Yeah.
You know what? If you like what I'm doing, you know where to find me.
Jesus, bro, the enthusiasm. Yeah, go fuck yourself. No.
I mean, it's like, if you like my content, cool.
Check it out.
Check it out. Stay tuned. There's plenty more. I've got 50 on my queue of things that I've already done that are waiting to come out. And so it's, it is what it is. But, if you like what you see and all that.
All right. All right. I agree. I got it. All right. We're done. We're good,
we're done.
All right. See you.
Yeah, later.
All right.
No, anyways. If you want to plug anything, go for it.
No, I mean I get plugged. I got multiple books. My memoir is called Shark in the Housing Pool. It's it's on. You can buy it on Amazon. You buy all my books on Amazon.
Okay.
You look up Mathew B. Cox. There's actually a Mathew S. Cox who writes like fantasy or something. But mine's all true crime. So
okay,
yeah. Good times.
Cool. And then I'll put all that in the show notes and the description and all the other stuff where they can find you. I might reach out and say, hey, man, shoot me something I can copy and paste because...
Yeah, my artwork's all on Instagram. And I actually have a YouTube channel also. It's called Cox Pop Art.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. It's got all like time-lapse videos of me painting like real quick.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'll show you when this is off.
Yeah, for sure. All right, yeah, and if you want to find me, you know where to go. Linktree. For now, the website is under development right now and getting built as we speak. But
all right, see you.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up.
On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast.
See you next time.